In this video, we'll go over how to find a highly profitable diamond in the rough property and make an offer on it so good they can't refuse it. That was my best Godfather impersonation.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Throughout the video, I will go over how I got an $83,000 discount on a property and what to do if you're stuck in a multiple offer situation. So trust me, you're not gonna want to miss this. Hi, my name is Ryan Chaw, your friendly neighborhood real estate investor, and I teach new investors how to get their first profitable deal. Now, put yourself in these shoes, just for a second. Let's say that you're trying to find a house in a market that you know nothing about. What neighborhoods would you even start to look at? And how do you know if you're getting a good deal or a lemon? Bad idea. Oh man, that was so sour. Let's not do that again. Now, you definitely don't want to go around blindly just buying random deals. That would be the equivalent of going to Las Vegas and putting all of your money on a bet at the Baccarat table. Yes, this sounds fun and exciting, and you could win big. But then you also have a very good chance of losing all of your money, which we don't want to do. Instead, you'll want to have a strategy. And I'll go over my strategy in just a second, so stay tuned. Let's do a quick pop quiz, just for fun. What do you think is the very first step that you should take to determine if a house is a good deal or not a good deal? I'll give you a hint. This is something that you should do no matter what housing market you are in. A. Assessing the property's curbside appeal. B. Investigating the property's historical sales data. C. Asking your father-in-law, who hopefully is not the mafia's godfather. And D. Running comparables. Well, if you guessed the answer was D, you are correct. And this is my tip number 1, which is to always run comparables, also known as comps. Running comps is the process of comparing similar properties to determine if the property that you're looking at is overvalued or undervalued. For instance, the comparable properties could be in the same neighborhood, they could have the same square footage, same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms. I love running comps because it gets me excited to look for the diamond in the rough property. Plus, I'm also just naturally curious to see what kind of nice and beautiful houses are out there on the market. I'll frequently imagine myself living in them, and sometimes I'll tour the property again in my dreams. Psst, don't tell anyone. They might think that is weird. To find a great deal by running comps, I recommend going to Zillow.com. You can see here that I'm pulling up a property in Baltimore, Maryland. You will want to write down a few specific details from this house listing so that you can see if it's a good deal or not. First, you want to note down how many bedrooms and bathrooms this property has. Then, if it's a single family home or a multiple unit property like a duplex or triplex, I'll usually say that here. Then note what the total square footage is, the price that it's being sold at, the property's zip code, and what general condition the property is in. I usually rate a home's condition as poor, fair, average, good, or excellent. After you jot down these notes, go ahead and copy and paste the zip code into the Zillow search bar. Then click on Sold Homes. Click Apply. Then set the maximum price point to be about $200,000 over the current price of the house so that you're not looking at outlier properties. Under bedrooms and bathrooms, you want to choose the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms as that house that you looked at. Then click on Home Type, and if it's a single family home, choose Houses. If it's a multi-unit property, choose Multifamily. Click Apply. Then finally, click on this More tab and choose the same square footage as the house that you were looking at or pretty close. And for the maximum square footage, choose about 500 square foot more. Finally, scroll down to the bottom and click on Sold in the last 90 days. Click Apply. So in this case, there weren't that many houses that are within the same zip code, so I'm going to go ahead and click Remove Boundary, just so I can see a few more zip codes around the area. And boom, you see all the houses that match the same specs as the ones you're thinking of buying. This one, for instance, is in a slightly better condition and a bit more expensive, which suggests that the house I'm looking at might be at a reasonable price point. You can go through these properties one at a time to see what is a typical price range for this market. The actual value of the home you're thinking of buying should fall within this price range. Now I'm going to show you a cool trick you can use to estimate a property's true value, which is the price per square foot strategy. Let's take this example. This property sold for about $130 per square foot. Now let's say this property was in a similar condition as the house you want to buy. You would simply multiply the price per square foot, which is 130, by the total square footage of the house you want to buy. In this case, it was 2,741. This gives you $356,330, which is not that far off from the actual offer price. But if this neighborhood was similar to the other one we were looking at, this property might be about $20,000, $30,000 overpriced. Especially given that the other one was in a better condition than this one. Okay, great. Now that we found what is a reasonable price point in the area, next we need to start building our real estate dream team by consulting with some real estate experts. I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself with a rock star team. Because there's a saying that goes, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. In other words, if you want to become successful, surround yourself with other successful people and figure out how they did it. Now, to start to build your real estate dream team, it's not that difficult. All you need to do to start is to contact a highly reviewed local realtor in the market you want to invest in. If you need help finding a rockstar realtor, you can check out my video titled 4 Simple Steps to Get Started in Real Estate Investing Today, and I'll go ahead and put a link down below in the description. Now, once you have your local real estate agent, you'll move on to my tip number 2, which is to ask the agent specific questions about that housing market. I ask 3 questions. Question number 1 is, what is the average days on market in this neighborhood? This basically means, how long is a house listed on the market before it is sold? If the house has been on the listings for 1 to 2 months, for example, the seller is more likely to want to get rid of their house because they seem to be having trouble finding other buyers. Question number 2 that I asked the local realtor is, what do you think about the general condition of this house? Are there any red flags? For example, is there mold and water damage everywhere? If this is the case, it might be best to just find another property to buy. Finally, question number 3 to ask the local realtor is, what is the seller's motivation for selling the property? I ask this so that I can give the seller what they want and get back what I need from them in return. This is also called the law of reciprocity. When given a gift, a person is more likely to give you a gift back in return. For example, if the seller is moving to a different city, maybe they want a longer escrow period so that they have some time to line up the other house that they will be moving into. In return for the longer escrow period, you can ask them to lower the sales price of the property. Have you seen those bachelor and bachelorette shows? Basically, it's a show where there's a bunch of bachelors that compete against each other to marry a beautiful bachelorette. Well, negotiating real estate transactions is very similar to this. In each situation, you're trying to find common ground and build rapport. You want to show genuine interest for the seller's needs and concerns. And you'll want to show yourself as a serious and well-qualified buyer financially. What I personally love about the negotiation phase of a real estate transaction is that you get to come up with creative ways to make this a win-win situation so that both the seller and you get what you want out of the transaction. Now, let's talk about something exciting. Here's the house that I got an $83,000 discount on. Let's go over exactly how I did it. Stay tuned. The house had been listed on the market for almost 90 days when I looked at it, meaning that the seller was likely starting to get very desperate to get rid of it. When I asked my agent about the seller's motivation for selling, she said the seller was also an investor and they wanted to get it off their hands because they weren't making much cash flow. It was also 10 bedrooms, which explained why most people didn't want to buy it. When I toured the property, there were only 3 of the total bedrooms occupied. Since this was a motivated seller, I thought, okay, how about I put in an offer $100,000 under the asking price and see what happens. The asking price was $450,000, as you can see here. So I asked for $350,000. To my pleasant surprise, the seller countered at $83,000 under the asking price, and I ended up accepting that offer at $367,000. The property went on to make over $3,500 per month in net cash flow because I rented it out by the bedroom, while having 10 bedrooms. Next, let's move on to an extremely clever strategy that you should be using on every deal if you can. I've been investing in real estate for 8 years, and trust me when I say almost nobody uses this strategy that I'm about to go over. But it can save you tens of thousands of dollars on a real estate transaction. But before we go into it, let's talk about what's the difference between a front-end cost and a back-end cost so that you can better understand the strategy that I will cover. On the sale of a property, your front-end costs are very simple. They are the sales price of the property. Now, the back-end costs are different. These are costs that you pay after you purchase the property. Back-end costs include things like closing costs, furniture costs, renovation costs, and repair costs. The big difference between a front-end cost and a back-end cost is using what we call leveraged money, meaning the bank is paying a majority of the sales price of the property, versus the back-end costs, you have to pay for those out of pocket. Renovations, repairs, furniture, usually that's all out of your pocket. So this brings me to tip number 3. In every real estate transaction, you should look to minimize your back-end costs, even if it means increasing your front-end costs during the sale. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Let's say you're purchasing house number 1 and you put a $50,000 down payment on it. This is known as your front-end cost. Now let's say on the back-end cost, you have to put another $50,000 toward repairs and renovations and furniture. This means that in total, you're spending $100,000. And let's just say that this house cash flows $1,000 per month. So that is scenario number 1. Now here is scenario number 2, where your seller is paying for most of the renovations and repairs. And so that means your back-end costs are nearly zero. In this case, you can now put that $50,000 that you used for your original back-end costs toward buying a second property. So the total is still $100,000. But the coolest part here is that you have 2 houses, and each house makes $1,000 per month. So total cash flow is $2,000 per month for the same $100,000 that you spent. One of the best strategies that I've used in real estate investing is to offer more on the front end and then get that money back on the back end. This makes me very competitive against other buyers because I'm offering a higher sales price, even though later on I might ask for that money back on the back end. One note I would make here is because you're getting a higher sales price, you're using a little bit more depth on the deal. But depth is actually a great thing to use, especially when you're starting out, because the more depth that you use, the less money you have out of pocket, which means that every dollar that you invest into the deal has a higher return on investment. Basically, every dollar that you put in goes much further when you use depth. Now, the best way to eliminate your back-end costs is to get thorough home inspections, and then get a general contractor to quote out all of the items that need to be repaired on the home inspections. Once you have this quote in writing, you can go ahead and send that to the seller and then ask them for the full amount for all the repairs, including repairs that are not an immediate need, but may be a problem in the near future. Now, let's say the seller says, "Screw you, I don't want to cover those costs." Instead, what you can do if they do that is increase the sales price of your property by $10,000 and then ask for that $10,000 to be paid back to you towards the closing costs. I'll show you what I mean. Let's say you make the new purchase price $110,000 rather than the original purchase price of $100,000. Then you ask for that increase of $10,000 to be paid back as seller credit towards your repair costs. This way, at the end of the day, the seller still gets back $100,000, which is the same price they would have gotten originally. But you save $10,000 in out-of-pocket costs. And instead, it's the bank that's paying up that extra $10,000 as leveraged money. Using this strategy has literally saved me from having to back out on a third of my deals. That's exactly how powerful it is. Because it is a really clever way to make a home sale a win-win situation for both the buyer and the seller. Hopefully it makes you more comfortable as well and gives you that "I got this" confidence, knowing that you have multiple options available to you in the negotiation of a sale. Now, let's talk about the final situation that nobody wants to get into, which is a multiple offer situation. This happens when you have a great house in a great location, which attracts many buyers, and so you have multiple offers being put on that property. So let me ask you, how would you outcompete all those other buyers? It's quite a stressful situation, isn't it? But luckily you're here watching this video, so you'll know exactly what to do if it comes up for you. And the next couple of tips will give you an edge over your competition. Now, there are a few ways to handle this. The first way to handle it is to include in your offer something called an escalation clause, which basically states that if there's other offers put on that property, your offer will automatically go up to $1,000 above all the other offers on that property up to your maximum price point that you're willing to pay. This gives you a much higher chance of getting the property without having to overpay for it. Now, there are some cities that frown down on escalation clauses and may not allow them. If this happens to you, you instead will want to use what I call the line in the sand method. And that brings me to tip number 4, make sure to set a target monthly cash flow goal before you get into the property specifics. For example, I usually recommend setting my minimum cash flow to be $1,500 per month after all expenses are paid. Once you have your cash flow goal, make sure it's a reasonable goal, of course. Then you just have to back calculate what's the maximum price you can pay for this property so that the mortgage is low enough that you hit your monthly cash flow goal. I'll give you an example. Let's say your rental income is $3,000. And let's say your cash flow target is $1,500 per month. Well, you just subtract the two, and that gives you the maximum monthly mortgage payment that you can pay, which in this case is $1,500 per month. Here's the original cash flow equation. You take your rental income, subtract out your monthly mortgage payment, and that's what your monthly cash flow is. If we rearrange this equation, it becomes the max mortgage payment you can pay equals your rental income minus $1,500 because we set that as the cash flow goal. Once you solve for the maximum monthly mortgage you can pay, you can plug this into a mortgage calculator to determine the maximum cost of the property you can pay for. I call this the line in the sand method because I'm essentially drawing a line in the sand for the maximum price I feel comfortable paying for this property. And that price point always becomes my highest and best offer. If I don't get the property, I'm totally fine walking away from that deal because I know that if I pay higher than the line in the sand price point, the deal will stop making financial sense for me. This allows me to be very comfortable with the offer price points that I put in. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with your friends so that I can reach more people who are really struggling just getting started in real estate investing. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video.